There's a moment that happens in independent garages up and down this country, and almost nobody outside the trade ever sees it. A car pulls onto the forecourt. Nice car. Big, shiny family SUV, maybe 3 or 4 years old, maybe 8. The owner walks in, holding the keys and a warning light on their phone, and the bloke behind the counter walks out, has a look at the badge, has a look at the registration, and comes back in with an expression you learn to recognise. And he says, "Sorry, mate, we can't take that one." Not won't? Can't. That's the bit people get wrong. There is no government list. Nobody in Westminster has outlawed a single one of the vehicles I'm about to go through. Every one of them is perfectly legal to tax, insure, and drive down the M6 tomorrow morning. But there is a growing list of SUVs that thousands of ordinary British workshops have quietly decided they will not touch. And the reasons are so specific and so consistent that once you understand them, you'll never look at a shiny new crossover the same way again. I've spent a long time around this trade, long enough to have stood in workshops where the ramp in the corner was installed before I was born and still works perfectly, and long enough to have watched what used to be a 2-hour job turn into a job nobody in that building is legally allowed to complete. I've taken engines apart, where the timing belt lives inside the sump, soaking in oil, quietly turning into black soup that clogs the pickup and kills the engine at 40,000 miles. And I'll be straight with you. The first time I saw one of those apart, I thought somebody had made a mistake. They hadn't. It was designed that way on purpose. So here's what you're getting in the next half hour. 12 SUVs sold in big numbers in Britain that independent garages increasingly refuse, and the exact reason for each one. Not vague grumbling, the actual mechanism. Number 8 is the one where the manufacturer's own paperwork does the refusing for them. And number 10 isn't about the car's engineering at all, it's about the concrete floor under it. Stay for that one, because it tells you something about the next 10 years that nobody selling you a car is going to mention. Let me show you what's actually going on here, because a garage saying no is never a mood. It's a business decision, and it comes down to 3 things. The first is liability. A garage that touches a component and it later fails owns that failure, whatever the real cause. If a vehicle has a known, hidden, catastrophic failure mode, the last set of hands on it becomes the defendant. So the sensible answer is to keep your hands off. The second is access. On a modern vehicle, a huge amount of the work isn't turning a spanner, it's talking to the car, clearing a fault, coding a module, waking a system back up after you've replaced the part. That conversation happens through the manufacturer's server, and the manufacturer decides who gets an account. In April of 2026, the UK finally switched on a scheme called SIRMI, which gives accredited independents a single verified route into that security data. 22 marques signed up. Notably, the Volkswagen Group brands did not, so it's progress, and it's incomplete, and the gaps are exactly where the refusals happen. The third is economics. Some jobs cost more in tooling, training, floor space, and insurance than they'll ever return. And here's the thread that ties all 12 of these together, so hold on to it. In every single case, a risk that used to sit with the company that designed the vehicle has been quietly shifted onto the small business that repairs it, and onto you. Number 1. The Ford EcoSport. Small, cheap, sold by the shipload, and the reason garages flinch is a strip of rubber you cannot see or inspect without stripping the engine. Ford brought the wet belt to Britain in 2012 with the 1-litre EcoBoost 3-cylinder. Instead of running the belt dry on the outside of the engine where you can look at it, they ran it inside, submerged in engine oil. There's a real engineering reason. An oil-bathed belt is quieter and has less friction than a chain, and less friction means a better number on the emissions test. What they got in the real world was belt material breaking down, shedding into the oil, and the debris blocking the oil pump pickup. Lose oil pressure, and the engine is finished, usually with no warning at all. Ford originally quoted 150,000 miles or 10 years for that belt, then later advised a precautionary change at 100,000. Owners were losing engines well before either figure. In the States, Ford recalled around 140,000 vehicles in 2024 over the oil pump belt, covering the EcoSport and the Focus. The trouble for your local garage is simple. Quote, a wet belt job on one of these, and you're taking responsibility for an engine that may already have debris circulating in it. If it dies 6 weeks later, guess who the owner is ringing? Number 2. The Ford Kuga, the 1.5 EcoBoost petrol. Different fault, same instinct from the trade. On a batch of these 4-cylinder EcoBoost engines, from roughly 2013 to 2019, the coolant passages in the cylinder head sit too close to the combustion chamber. Coolant works its way past the gasket and into the cylinder, usually seeping in as the engine cools down after you've parked. Next morning it fires up, runs rough, throws a misfire code on one cylinder, and the owner thinks it needs plugs. What it actually needs in the bad cases is a block, because if enough liquid collects in a cylinder, you can hydraulically lock the engine and bend a rod or crack the casting. Now put yourself behind the counter. A customer wants you to chase a misfire. You can spend 3 hours on diagnostics, replace coils and plugs in good faith, and the car comes back a fortnight later with a cracked block that had nothing to do with your work and everything to do with a casting decision made a decade ago. Ford revised the design, but plenty of pre-revision cars are still out there, and a lot of shops now simply say, take it to a main dealer and let them own it. Number 3. The Peugeot 3008, and everything wearing the same engine. This is the one that's genuinely reshaping the British repair trade. The 1 litre and 1.2 PureTech petrol. The 3-cylinder fitted across Peugeot, Citroën, Vauxhall and DS uses the same belt-in-oil idea, and it has produced catastrophic failures right across Europe. The belt degrades, the debris clogs the oil pump strainer, oil pressure collapses. Owners have been quoted £3,000 to £6,000, which on a 7-year-old family car is the same as writing it off. Stellantis has moved. There's an extended warranty position covering parts and labour up to 10 years or 112,000 miles. And since May of 2025, UK owners have been able to claim through a compensation portal for costs from January 2022 to December 2024. But read the conditions, because they matter more than the money. Servicing had to follow the maintenance plan, and diagnosis and repair had to be carried out through the authorised network, which means the moment your independent garage touches that engine, your claim is in danger. So they don't touch it, not because they can't, but because helping you costs you thousands. The same engine sits in the C5 Aircross, the Grandland, the Crossland, the DS7. From 2023 onward, Stellantis moved the new 1.2 over to a chain, which tells you everything about what they thought of the belt. Number 4, the Nissan Qashqai. 2 separate reasons, one old and one new. The old one is the 1.2 Dig-T petrol, where owners reported timing chain wear and oil consumption on higher mileage cars, and a chain job on a transverse 3-cylinder in a tight engine bay is a lot of labour to sell to somebody who bought the car for its running costs. The new one is bigger. The current Qashqai is sold in enormous numbers with e-Power, a series hybrid where the petrol engine is a generator and the wheels are driven by an electric motor. That means a genuine high-voltage system, orange cables, a traction inverter, an interlock circuit. To work on that legally and safely, a technician needs recognised high-voltage qualification, and the Institute of the Motor Industry's own figures put roughly 26% of UK technicians at that standard, around 72,000 people, with the rate of new qualifications actually slowing. Three-quarters of the trade cannot legally go near the orange cables. So a car marketed as an easy, sensible family SUV arrives at a workshop that has serviced Qashqais for 15 years, and this one they have to turn away. Number 5. The BMW X3 and the X1 alongside it on the older 2-litre diesel. Every mechanic in Britain knows this story. On the N47 generation of that engine, BMW put the timing chain at the back, at the flywheel end, hard against the bulkhead. On paper, it's tidy engineering. The chain runs off the crank in the most rigid part of the block. In practice, the chain guides wear, the chain stretches, and it starts making a rattle at idle that sounds like a bag of spanners. And to fix it, you don't take a cover off the front of the engine, you separate the gearbox from the engine, or you pull the whole lot out, which on a four-wheel drive X3 with a transfer case is a serious operation. That's the best part of a week of one ramp, one technician, and a bill that a lot of owners simply won't sanction on a car that's worth $4,000. And here's the part that stings. If the chain lets go while it's on your ramp waiting for the customer to make their mind up, that's your problem now. Garages don't refuse this job because it's difficult. They refuse it because the economics only work if the customer is willing to spend more than the car's value, and most aren't. Number 6. The Mercedes GLC. Done nothing wrong with the engineering, and that's what makes this one interesting. The refusal here is almost entirely about the gate. A modern Mercedes expects you to open a diagnostic session through the manufacturer's own online system, with a verified account, on a live connection, often on a per-session or subscription basis. Replace a battery on a car with intelligent charging and it needs registering to the vehicle. Fit a module and it needs coding. Touch anything on the 48-volt mild hybrid side, and you're back to needing high-voltage competence, because 48 volts is low enough that people get casual about it and high enough to do damage. And then there's the calibration problem, which applies to half this list, but bites hardest on premium German cars. Change a windscreen, alter the ride height, or straighten a bumper on a GLC, and the forward-facing camera and the radar behind the badge both need recalibrating on a level floor, with a target board at a measured distance using the manufacturer's procedure. Get it wrong, and the automatic braking either fires at a shadow or doesn't fire at all. That's floor space most workshops don't have. In a building, most workshops rent, so a small independent looks at the sums. A subscription, the hardware, the target rig, the training, the audit, for the handful of GLCs on their books. And they conclude reasonably that it isn't worth it. Then a customer with a perfectly healthy car and one dead module gets sent to a franchise dealer 25 miles away and pays dealer rates, and nobody in that chain did anything wrong. That's the whole point. The system produced that outcome on its own. Number 7. The Volkswagen Tiguan and the Touareg above it. Same species of problem, sharper edges. Volkswagen Group vehicles use what's usually called component protection. Fit a replacement module, and the car refuses to accept it until it's been authorized against the manufacturer's system. Fair enough as an anti-theft measure. The consequence is that a physically completed repair can sit there as a non-functioning car. And here's the current specific detail. When the CERMI scheme went live in Britain on the 1st of April 2026, giving accredited independents one verified door into security-related repair data, 22 marques committed to it. The Volkswagen Group brands were not among them. So on the very cars where a security gateway blocks the most routine diagnostic work, the single most useful key the British aftermarket has ever been handed doesn't yet turn in the lock. A garage that can rebuild a gearbox from scratch will still hand you back your keys and point you towards a dealer because the last 5 minutes of the job belong to somebody else. Number 8. The Range Rover Sport and the full-size Range Rover with it. This is the one where the refusal comes from every direction at once. Start with the body. It's aluminium, bonded and riveted, and a panel repair needs specific rivets, specific adhesives, an oven, and certified training. ordinary body shops can't do it, which is why straightforward-looking damage costs several times what it would on a steel car. Then, insurance. Range Rovers became the most stolen vehicles in Britain. Insurers pulled cover in London, postcodes altogether, or imposed theft excesses running to thousands, and JLR ended up spending £10 million on security and launching its own insurance product just to keep customers on the road. That policy, like a lot of others, specifies repairs through an approved body shop using genuine parts. Your local garage is contractually written out, and then came September 2025, when a cyber attack forced JLR to shut down its IT systems worldwide. Independents who'd specialised in Land Rovers for decades found they couldn't open the parts catalogue. One garage owner in West Sussex put it plainly on the BBC. Without the database, he couldn't identify the part, so he couldn't buy it, so he couldn't fix the car. Production stayed paused into late September. The government put a £1.5 billion loan guarantee behind the supply chain. That is what total dependence on one company's server looks like when the server goes dark. Number 9. The Hyundai Kona Electric. A good car, and a cautionary tale about where a garage's risk actually sits. Early Konas used cells from LG's Nanjing plant, and after fires in several countries, the campaign escalated from a software update to full battery replacement, around 82,000 vehicles globally, at a cost reported near $900 million. Britain's first slice of that was small, around 1,670 cars, for a battery management software update in October 2020. But look what owners were told in the meantime: park it outside, away from buildings. And that instruction is the reason for the refusal. A workshop is a building, usually full of solvents, oxygen bottles, other people's cars, and a mezzanine of parts. Ask a garage owner to keep a vehicle with an open high-voltage fire investigation inside overnight, and watch their face. The story hasn't finished either. In March 2026, a fresh recall covering more than 100,000 Konas built between 2018 and 2023 went out for battery monitoring software that might not spot thermal instability early enough. None of that makes the Kona a bad car. It makes it a car most small workshops would rather see parked on the far side of the yard. Number 10. The Kia EV9, and every 2.5-ton electric SUV like it. This one has nothing to do with faults. Your typical British independent has a 2-post lift that was bought years ago and rated somewhere around 3 tons. Sounds like plenty until you understand 2 things. First, these vehicles are enormously heavy because a big battery is a big lump of metal. Second, and this is what people miss, the load isn't spread the way the lift was designed for. The battery is a slab down the centre of the floor pan, so the mass sits low and central instead of over the axles, and the arms have to reach further inboard to find a jacking point that isn't the pack. Equipment specialists are now telling British workshops that 4 tons is the sensible rating for heavy electric SUVs and vans, and they're finding ramps installed in the 80s and 90s still working, still safe for the cars they were bought for, and quietly a long way outside their comfort zone with what's rolling in now. A ramp that can technically lift something is not the same as a ramp with a proper safety margin. So the honest garage owner says no. And replacing a lift, plus the concrete work underneath it, is tens of thousands of pounds that a 4-bay shop in a market town does not have lying around. Number 11. The Tesla Model Y, Britain's best-selling electric SUV, and structurally unlike anything an independent has worked on before. Tesla builds large sections of the underbody as single-piece aluminium castings, and on some builds, the battery pack is a structural member glued in and carrying load rather than hanging underneath like a fuel tank. Cast a large part in one piece, and you gain speed, weight, and rigidity. What you lose is the ability to cut out a damaged section and weld in a new one because there is no section. There's a second problem the trade talks about more than the public does, and it's the pack itself. On a conventional electric car, the battery unbolts, comes down on a table, and in theory, a module inside it can be replaced. Bond a pack in as part of the structure, and it stops being a component and becomes part of the shell. Add to that a service ecosystem where parts, diagnostics and body repair run largely through Tesla's own network and its approved shops. And you get a vehicle where a competent general garage can do the tyres, the brakes, the cabin filter, the suspension, and then hits a wall. Not a technical wall either, a permissions one. Insurers noticed this before drivers did, which is a large part of why cars with barely visible damage end up written off. There's nothing sinister about any single one of those decisions. Together, they add up to a car that most of the trade can only work on around the edges. Number 12, the BYD Atto 3, and the Chinese wave arriving behind it. Let me be fair here, because this gets shouted about for the wrong reasons. These are not bad cars. They're well built, well equipped and priced sharply. The problem is everything around them. Britain's National Body Repair Association has been blunt about it, pointing at the GWM ORA as a car repairers were writing off for damage that would sail through a body shop on a Ford or a Vauxhall purely because the parts weren't available. Owner communities report waits of 8 to 16 weeks for specific body panels against 2 to 4 for the established brands. And underneath that sits something more fundamental. Insurance in this country works on repairing to an approved manufacturer standard. And for a lot of these models, the repair methods simply weren't written, because in the Chinese domestic market, with far cheaper labour, the answer to side damage is to replace the entire body side. Hand that instruction to a British body shop, and the labour alone writes the car off. Insurers have responded with premiums reported at up to 3 times the equivalent European model, and in some cases by declining cover. So the refusal reaches you as a quote you can't afford, rather than a conversation at a counter. Now here's the part that actually matters, and it's got nothing to do with any of these 12 badges. Look back across that list and notice what the individual faults have in common. A belt hidden inside the oil, where you can't inspect it and can't warn the customer. A coolant passage that fails silently and takes the block with it. A timing chain at the back of the engine. A repair you can complete with your hands but not authorise with a laptop. A battery that's part of the structure. A weight that outgrew the tooling. Not one of those is an accident, and not one of them is a conspiracy either. Every single one was a rational decision made by intelligent engineers under pressure to hit a target. A few grams of carbon dioxide, a few kilos of weight, a few pounds off the build cost, a few seconds off the assembly line. But look at where the consequences landed. They didn't land on the people who made the decision. They landed on a bloke with 4 ramps and a parts washer who now has to decline work he's perfectly capable of doing because the liability was engineered onto him. And they landed on you, in the form of a car that can only be serviced by the network that sold it to you. That's the trick. And it's worth saying plainly. There is no money in a timing belt you can inspect through a plastic cover in 90 seconds. There is a great deal of money in an engine that has to come out. There is no money in a module anybody can fit. There is a great deal of money in a module that phones home before it will work. There is no money in a car 3,000 garages can service. There is an enormous amount of money in a car that only 400 can. And the people profiting aren't villains twirling a moustache. The parts maker sells a whole engine instead of a belt kit. The franchised network keeps servicing revenue that used to leak away to independents once a car turned 5. The finance company would rather you replaced the vehicle than repaired it. The manufacturer books the emissions credit that the wet belt earned in the first place. Everybody in that chain acted reasonably. The bill still arrives at your door. What's disappeared in the middle of it all Here's something Britain used to be quietly good at, and I don't think we've fully noticed. The independent garage was a genuine check on all of this. Somewhere you could take a 9-year-old car and get an honest second opinion from somebody whose reputation lived on the street where you both lived. That worked because the knowledge was shareable. A fault could be diagnosed, discussed at the trade counter, written up in a manual, passed to an apprentice. Once diagnosis becomes a login, that whole system stops. You can't pass on a subscription. And the deeper loss isn't the money, it's the shrinking of what an ordinary person is permitted to understand about the machine they've paid £30,000 for. A car used to be a thing you could learn. Increasingly, it's a thing you're granted access to. Good engineering has never been frightened of being understood. When a design starts needing you not to look at it, that tells you something. And it isn't about your ability, it's about theirs. So here's what I'd actually do with all of this. First, before you buy anything, find out how the camshafts are driven. Chain, dry belt, or belt in oil. That one question separates a car you can own cheaply from a car that owns you. If it's a wet belt, treat the maker's interval as optimistic and change it early and budget for it. Second, ring 2 independent garages near you before you buy, not after. Tell them the exact model and ask if they'd take it on. If both say no, you've just learned more about that car than any road test will tell you, and it cost you 2 phone calls. Third, if you're buying anything electrified, ask whether the garage holds a recognised high-voltage qualification and check whether there's more than one within sensible distance. One qualified shop within 30 miles isn't a repair network, it's a queue. Fourth, if your car is under any manufacturer goodwill scheme, extended warranty or compensation program, read who is allowed to do the work before you book it in anywhere. On the PureTech engines, that single condition is worth thousands of pounds. Fifth, on anything 3 years old or more, get the service history and check the belt, the chain, and any recall work has actually been done, not just scheduled. Recall outstanding is a negotiating tool. Recall completed is peace of mind. And the payoff for doing all that is simple and very real. In 3 years' time, when the warranty is gone and the finance is done, you'll be the one whose car still has somewhere to go. A local shop that knows the vehicle will quote you a fair price and will pick up the phone when something rattles. That's not nostalgia. That's the difference between a car that costs you money and a car that costs you a fortune. Now, I want to hear from you, because the people who know this best are the ones living it. If you run a workshop, tell me in the comments which vehicle you've stopped accepting and what finally made you draw the line. If you're an owner who's been turned away, tell me the model, the fault, and what you were told. And if you're somewhere outside Britain watching this and thinking your trade has gone the same way, say so, because I suspect it has, and I'd like to know how fast. I read every one of these. The best things I learn about this stuff come from that comment section, not from a press release, and that's exactly why I keep making these. Next time I want to take this apart from the other side and look at the SUVs the trade actively likes. The ones where mechanics quietly buy them for their own families, where the belt is a chain, the modules aren't locked, and there's a used engine on every shelf in the country. One of them has an engine design that's barely changed in 15 years, and the reason why is a genuinely good story. Subscribe so you catch it. Until then, do yourself a favour. Next time you're standing on a forecourt with a salesman telling you how advanced something is, ask him one plain question. Who else, apart from you, is allowed to fix it? Watch what happens to his face. That answer is worth more than the brochure.